I thought he was cheating. The truth destroyed my life. And when I say destroyed, I don't mean just heartbroken or disappointed. I mean it shattered the very reality I was living in, turning everything I knew about my past, my family, and my identity into a carefully constructed, agonizing lie. The moment I found out what was really going on, I didn't just lose a husband. I lost my own name. It wasn't the kind of secret you recover from. It was the kind of secret that requires you to grieve the life you thought you had. I'm still navigating this absolute wreckage, and I need to know, was I completely justified in severing every single tie with my entire family after the truth came out? Or was that too extreme? Tell me, what would you have done if the people you loved most had orchestrated a lifelong deception against you? You see, for the last 10 years, my life with Mark was, by all accounts, perfect. We met in college, got married young, and settled into a comfortable, loving existence in a small town close to both our families. We were that couple everyone envied, the one with the cozy house, the golden retriever, and the easy laughter. Mark was a rock, dependable, loving, and slightly boring in the best possible way. He worked in IT, which meant long, often unpredictable hours, but he was always dedicated to me. He was the only child of two very sweet, equally boring parents, and I was close to them, too. My own parents lived just 20 minutes away, and we were incredibly tight-knit. Weekly Sunday dinners at my mom's house were a sacred tradition. We were a family unit, a powerful, unwavering circle of love and familiarity. The whole thing started with suspicion, that little insidious worm of doubt that begins to eat away at your peace. Mark's job had always involved late nights, but lately, the late nights had become too late, and the excuses felt thin, almost rehearsed. He'd say he was setting up new servers or troubleshooting a major network crash. But then there were the small things. He became protective of his phone, always placing it face down, and he started wearing a new, expensive cologne I hadn't bought him. The final straw came one Tuesday evening when he called at 9 p.m. to say he'd be home around midnight, and 5 minutes later, a text flashed on his phone's screen from a number saved only as M. The text read, "Don't forget the files. See you soon." The X was what did it. It felt too intimate, too casual for a work colleague. My imagination immediately conjured up the whole cliché. The young, eager intern, the secret hotel rendezvous. I was hurt, angry, and terrified. I genuinely thought my perfect marriage was crumbling because Mark was having an affair. That night, fueled by adrenaline and paranoia, I did the unforgivable. I checked his work briefcase when he finally stumbled in, exhausted and smelling faintly of that new cologne. I was looking for hotel receipts, lipstick traces, anything remotely incriminating. But what I found was not a woman's phone number or a secret receipt. Tucked deep inside a zipper pocket was a faded, old-school manila folder, thick with documents, tied with a piece of brittle string. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I opened it, expecting tax returns or perhaps old college transcripts. The first thing I saw was a photocopy of a birth certificate. It wasn't mine. It was a certificate for a child named Maya Elizabeth Thompson, born 35 years ago, exactly my age. I checked the parents' names. Eleanor Thompson and Richard Thompson. My mother's name is Eleanor. My father's name is Richard. But the date of birth on this certificate was 6 months before the date of birth on my birth certificate, the one I had always known. Confused, I dug further into the folder. I found adoption papers, heavily redacted and decades old, detailing the legal adoption of a baby girl named Maya Elizabeth Thompson by a couple named Sarah and David Harrison. And those were Mark's parents' first names, my in-laws. I stood there in the quiet living room, the papers shaking violently in my hands, trying to piece together the fragments of this horrifying puzzle. It looked like the person I thought I was, the daughter of Eleanor and Richard, was actually the biological child of Mark's parents. And the girl named Maya, who was supposedly born 6 months before me, who was she? The folder held a small, crumpled, black and white photograph of a little girl, maybe 5 years old, who looked strikingly like me, standing between a man and a woman who were definitely my parents, Eleanor and Richard. But wait, I was the one who was supposed to be in that picture. The confusion was unbearable. Then, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The Maya who was born 6 months before me was the child Alina and Richard gave up for adoption. And I, the daughter they raised, the person whose birth certificate I carried, was the child Mark's parents, Sarah and David, had given up and then adopted back into the family unit through my marriage to Mark. No, wait, the paperwork showed two things. When my parents, Alina and Richard, gave up a daughter, Maya, for adoption 35 years ago. Two Mark's parents, Sarah and David, gave up a daughter, me, but under a different name, I realized, for adoption at the same time. The adoption papers were incomplete, but they pointed to a double switch asterisk. My mother, Alina, had a baby 6 months older than me, Maya, who was adopted by Mark's parents. And I, the baby of Mark's parents, was adopted by my parents, Alina and Richard. My parents raised Mark's sister, and Mark's parents raised me. And then they orchestrated my marriage to the man who was actually my brother, Mark. Mark's parents were my biological parents. My parents were Mark's biological parents. And the cheating text I saw, the files, the truth was far more grotesque than a simple affair. The next document I found explained the cheating context. It was a series of recent emails between Mark and a woman named Maya Thompson. The emails weren't romantic. They were fraught with tension and desperate planning. Maya was the sister I never knew, the girl my parents gave up, who had recently found them through an ancestry search and was now threatening to expose the whole switch. The files Mark was meeting her to get were the remaining documents Maya had proving the whole convoluted scheme. Mark wasn't meeting a lover. He was meeting his biological sister, the one my parents gave up, to cover up the fact that he was married to his other biological sister, me. The cologne, the late nights, the secrecy. It was all about damage control, desperately trying to keep the lid on a 35-year-old family secret that implicated everyone. The horror was paralyzing. My life was not my own. My parents were not my parents. My husband was my brother. The foundation of my entire existence was built on an elaborate, monstrous lie perpetrated by 4 people I deeply loved and trusted. The perfect marriage was incestuous. The family dinners were a performance. Every shared holiday, every comforting word, every promise was part of this sickening, decades-long cover-up. The sheer complexity and cold-blooded coordination required to pull this off for so long made my head spin. They had swapped us as bobbies, only to ensure that, somehow, the 2 children ended up back in the same interconnected family circle, and they guaranteed it by manipulating Mark and me into marriage. The M in the text wasn't a lover. It was Maya, the other piece of the puzzle. The whole time I was searching for signs of infidelity, the secret was a biological time bomb. So that's the situation I was in. The man I loved and lived with for 10 years was my biological brother, and our marriage was a result of a baby swap orchestrated by both sets of parents 35 years ago to, I assume, keep us all close and secret. I had been robbed of my true identity and forced into an unthinkable relationship. The pain wasn't just heartbreak, it was an existential crisis. I had the complete, devastating proof in my hands. I was facing the end of my marriage, the destruction of my identity, and the permanent rupture of my relationship with every single person who had ever claimed to love me. Before I tell you what I did next, the moment of complete nuclear confrontation, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted all 4 of them together, or taken them down one by one? Would you have filed for an annulment and run, or demanded to know the entire motivation behind the deception? The instinct to run was strong, but the need for truth was stronger. What would you have chosen? Silence and escape, or exposure and absolute destruction? The confrontation was swift, brutal, and absolutely necessary. I didn't wait for Mark to wake up the next morning. I stayed up all night, rereading every document, putting the names and dates together until the entire timeline was chillingly clear. My parents, Alina and Richard, had adopted a baby 6 months after giving birth to Maya and giving her up. Mark's parents, Sarah and David, had given birth to me and given me up, only to adopt Maya. And then, through social manipulation, they ensured Mark and I met. The whole thing was some sick, twisted attempt to undo their past mistakes while keeping the children close, like a horrifying family reunion that could never be spoken of. I woke Mark up just as the sun was rising. I didn't shout, I was too far past hysteria for that. I simply walked over to his side of the bed, dropped the manila folder onto his chest, and said, in a voice I barely recognized, "It's all here, Mark. Maya, the adoption papers, the names. You're not just my husband, you're my brother, and you know it." The blood drained from his face. His eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated terror and guilt. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't even try to lie. He just covered his face and started sobbing, confirming everything. He admitted that he had found out a year ago, when his father became ill, and confessed the whole thing on his deathbed, forcing Mark to promise he would never tell me. The late nights weren't meetings with Maya. They were frantic attempts to silence her and buy back the documents proving the whole thing. He was terrified of losing me, but he was also horrified by the secret. That was the moment I realized his love, while real, was utterly contaminated. My next step was to call both sets of parents. I arranged a mandatory, non-negotiable meeting at our house 2 hours later. I didn't tell them why, only that if they didn't show up, I would mail the documents to every person in their respective phone books. They all showed up, looking anxious and pale. When all 4 of them were sitting in my living room, the scene of so many loving, fake family gatherings, I stood over them like a judge. I didn't speak. I simply tossed the documents, the birth certificates, the adoption papers, the emails, onto the coffee table. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't the silence of confusion, it was the silence of guilt exposed. My mother, Alina, started weeping first, collapsing onto my father's shoulder. Mark's mother, Sarah, tried to reach out to me to touch my arm, and I recoiled instantly. "Don't touch me," I commanded, my voice like ice. "Tell me why. Why would you ruin 2 lives like this? Why force this? Incestuous bond? Was I just a misplaced object to you?" The story they finally confessed was a sickening blend of melodrama and desperation. When they were all in their 20s, they were best friends. My mother, Alina, couldn't bear to tell her family she was pregnant outside of marriage, so Mark's mother, Sarah, agreed to adopt Maya. Then, a tragic twist. A few months later, Sarah found herself unexpectedly pregnant with me, but because of a devastating health diagnosis, she knew she couldn't raise me, but desperately wanted me near. They saw an opportunity, swapped the bobbies and raised the wrong one, allowing them to remain close. They manipulated the local records, convinced the adoption agency they were the other couple, and performed the illegal swap. It was never about love for the bobbies. It was about covering up mistakes and maintaining proximity. When Mark and I started dating, they were thrilled, seeing it as fate, a way to permanently blend the families they had created. The consequence was immediate and total. I filed for an annulment based on the documented biological relationship, which was devastatingly straightforward. I didn't ask for a dime. I just wanted him out of my life, which he understood. The 4 of them, my parents and my in-laws, lost their relationship with me instantly. I changed my number, blocked them on all social media, and legally started the process of reclaiming my original birth name, the one I suspected was mine. I mourned my husband, I mourned my parents, and I mourned the sister I never got to know without the threat of blackmail. The complete devastation of my life was the realization that the people who should have been my safe harbor were the people who had put me in a moral and emotional shipwreck. I had to move out of the house. The memories were toxic. I've since relocated to a completely new city, started a new career, and am slowly learning who I am without the lie attached to my identity. I have sought out Maya, the sister they gave up, and we are cautiously building a relationship. She is the only living person who truly understands the complexity of this shared betrayal. The truth destroyed my life, but in destroying it, it forced me to rebuild something real, something truly my own. The truth is the hardest thing to live with, but the lie is what kills you slowly. Never let fear stop you from exposing the darkness. No matter how bright the people around you pretend to shine, I chose truth and identity over comfort and a lie, and that's the lesson I hope anyone watching takes away. Like this video if you support my decision to cut off all contact with the people who lied to me. Subscribe for more stories like this, where I share the reality of rebuilding a life shattered by secrets. And please, share your final, honest thoughts on their actions in the comments section. Did they deserve the total exile? I'll see you all in the next story.